Thanks very much, Myles.
Hello again. You guys, there's still fair. I was told that it was going to be a thin crowd. There's still a lot of you here. And everybody looks relatively awake and alert. All right. You guys want to hear me talk about social change some more? Good, because I've got about 45 minutes to do it, and I've got about an hour's worth of content to do it. So, customer service for social change. I am very passionate about customer service. I'm very passionate about social change. Those two things don't necessarily seem like they would go together. But what I want to talk about today is how we can provide context for the interactions that we have with people that will make them more transformational and less transactional. At the outset of doing this kind of work and thinking about this philosophy, you kind of need to think about what the change that you want to envision is. What sort of societal behavior patterns are you trying to shift? Do you want people to go vegan? Do you want people to desex their pets? Do you want people to keep their pets in homes? Are you looking to turn more people into adopters instead of shoppers? So thinking about the context of, thinking about the shift that you're trying to create is really important. Social change is about changing the behavior of large groups of people, right? It's not just about one-off behaviors. It's about really shifting the way that society behaves. I touched on this a little bit yesterday, or maybe the day before. It's all blending together. But I think that it's important to think about the work that we do right now and whether or not that's social change or social good. Social good is incredibly important. And there will always be a need for doing work that is good in the community, for sheltering animals, for responding to disaster situations, for providing low-cost services to people that need them. But doing that work in and of itself is not social change work. And I think it's important that we recognize that so that we can carve out time to include social change work in what we do. Does that make sense? Does everybody kind of get that? Because I know it can be a little bit of a blurry line sometimes. All of us have the opportunity to put a little bit of social change into what we do. Some of our programs are going to be inherently more social changey than others, but this workshop and this particular presentation is about how we can sort of inject a little bit of social change into something as simple as customer service in any organization. So social change has happened when there is a significant and sustained transformation of societal behavior, patterns, cultural norms, and values over a period of time. Key word here, sustained. So what we mean is that once this social change has happened, it does not change back. It's incredibly hard to create social change because behavior patterns are what they are, and when you're trying to shift a bunch of people's behavior patterns at once, that's challenging. But the good news is, once you succeed, it's incredibly hard to change them back. And that's how you know that social change has really taken root. Yesterday, I gave the example of the spay-neuter movement in the United States as being a really successful social change movement. There are other social change movements that are, that are just the product of new technology. So the fact that my iPhone crashed a couple of hours ago and I am now feel naked standing up here because my phone does not work and it's in my hotel room, that is social change, right? 20 years ago, I wouldn't have actually felt like a piece of me had been lopped off. But we all kind of rely on cell phones now, and we all rely specifically on phones that we can look up how to get anywhere and any kind of, any word that somebody says to you or any random Australian bird species. And so that's social change too, right? And it takes a lot to change the way that we behave. So understanding what we mean when we say that is important. When we think of ourselves as social change makers, we become more effective at creating this kind of change in the world. And so thinking about yourself through the lens of social change and thinking about how you engage in the work that you do, who you touch every day, and how you might influence change through those interactions will make you more effective just simply by thinking of it that way, by having the context and the lens through which to look at the work that you're doing. But an important piece of social change is understanding that when you want to change human behavior, it's not actually the behavior that you have to go at. Behaviors are the results of underlying causes. So beneath behavior patterns, there's going to be all kinds of different things that you might not realize that are not apparent or obvious in the moment. So on this, you can see on the screen here, this is the iceberg image, and the Titanic only saw the top, and so they thought they were fine, and all those underlying issues dragged them down to the bottom. And so that it's kind of really going to happen the same way. If you are looking at, again, going back to this example I keep using of desexing, if you're looking at pet owners who have intact animals, I saw a little staffy out on the street today with a couple of balls hanging in back there, because I've worked in this field so long that just like everyone here, I always look. It's kind of creepy. And if I was to just go up to that guy and say, hey, why haven't you neutered your dog? Probably not going to have a lot of success, right? Because I'm going directly at this behavior instead of looking at what maybe some of the underlying causes for why that person has made that decision or hasn't made that decision. So you have cultural norms, simply the way that, that groups of people behave around each other. So I've talked about standard of care in a community. That's a cultural norm. You know, where your family comes from, the resources that you have, the amount of, you know, there's all different kinds of cultural norms across geography and across socioeconomic groups. So those things are important. Values, which are handed down to you generally by your parents and your grandparents and your siblings. Values are things that are set for you when you're really, really young. A lot of us have values in common with one another, but those values can present themselves in different ways. And so values, you know, understanding what the values of the people that you're trying to serve is really, really key to creating a shift in behavior. Beliefs, and then systemic issues. And when I say systemic issues, what I'm talking about is systemic poverty, systemic racism. There are all kinds of things that can affect the way that people behave that you might never think of. For instance, when I first moved to Austin, I moved there from New York, and in New York, it's kind of like there's pockets of poverty around the city, and then there's pockets of wealth. It's kind of evenly distributed, with the exception of, you know, Manhattan from about 110th Street down is just all really wealthy. But other than that, the city's kind of a mix. And when I moved to Austin, I was really surprised because I told you we have these free clinics that we do out of a mobile unit, and we do them in city parks, and they're specifically chosen by the city for the sort of socioeconomic status of the area, the number of intakes coming in that area, and 90% of them are in what we call East Austin. So East Austin is the section of Austin that is east of the I-35 freeway, which runs right down the middle of town. And I thought it was so weird because you can be, it runs right next to downtown, so you can literally be standing downtown in a nice, big, wealthy condo, and you can walk under the overpass, and it's just a completely different town. And I couldn't figure out why. And so again, we have all our free clinics there because that's where you're more likely to see stray dogs. That's where you're more likely to see malnourished dogs. You're more likely to see, you know, dogs and cats running free, intact animals. And so I went back and I started doing some research. And it turns out that up until about the 1950s, it was actually illegal if you were a person of color to live anywhere but east of 35. You weren't allowed to get a mortgage. There really were no options to live anywhere but a few specific communities east of 35. Also, during that time, so, you know, from about the 1960s and earlier, east of 35 was the place that the city would let you open your business if you had a dirty business. Like, they had the most lax zoning laws. So we're talking about dumps, treatment plants, anything that's loud, anything that's stinky, anything that people don't want in their neighborhood went east of 35. There also were no human medical or veterinary medical clinics east of 35 until pretty recently. And honestly, at this point, most of the veterinary clinics east of 35 are Emancipet clinics. So when you step back, it's easy to say, I walk through the east side and I see all these kids walking around with pit bulls on chains and their dogs are intact, and I don't understand why, like what's wrong with these people. But if you look at it, there's been a couple hundred years of systemic oppression and systemic deprivation of services, of basic services that we all take for granted. Does that make sense? I challenge you guys to like look this stuff up in your own neighborhoods. For those of you who maybe grew up in a town and have lived there for a long time, you might already know the stuff. I moved to Austin, so I had to look it up. But you'd be kind of surprised what you find out. So really understanding systemic issues is a huge part of being successful in changing behavior patterns. So how does social change actually work? This is the model. It's pretty simple and it's pretty straightforward. An individual is exposed to an idea or message. They have a personal experience with that idea or message. That experience, and this is a separate step, must be transformational. So it's not just you ask them if they want to spay neuter, they say yes, you do it. Like, that's fine and that's great. You spay neutered that one animal, but was the experience so transformational that they will seek you out the next time they have another pet? And then finally, they share that message with their social group. So you are at the front end of this, sharing the idea or message. Ideally, over time, once social change takes hold, it's peer-to-peer. And these errors expand and grow and replicate exponentially as people are recommending these things, these new ideas and new messages to the other people in their social group. So customer service is a tool for creating social change by sharing transformative messages and creating personal experiences for all of your customers. This is a radically different way of thinking about customer service. This means it's no longer about getting an awesome Yelp review or having lots of stars on Facebook or whatever other social media or means of people that have for reviewing your business. It doesn't just mean getting a good buzz and word of mouth going around. It means actually thinking about every single interaction that you have with somebody in front of you in your shelter, in your clinic, in your advocacy organization. It means thinking about that as an opportunity to fundamentally shift the behavior of that individual and their family members and their neighbors. And that is heavy, right? Like, if you start to think about it that way, it can feel overwhelming almost, but it also can be really, really invigorating and energizing when you're thinking about going back and sitting at that customer service reception area in your clinic and really greeting every person that comes in and like trying to actually be creative about ways to make the experience special for them. Coming from a restaurant background, I think this is a really big thing for me because I'm the worst person to go out to eat with because I'm so critical of the food and the service and the decor and how clean the bathrooms are. It's a whole thing. But I think about customer service, and I've always thought of customer service in terms of like, you know, I want people to have this amazing experience. And that was before I even thought about the idea that we could actually change beliefs. So it's important. So we have this is our basic #1 customer service rule at our organization. Find out what the customer really wants. So when I say find out what they want, it doesn't just mean assuming that what they said sounds like the right thing. I always use the example of AT&T operators, and I don't know if that will work here, but in general, so there's active listening. You listen to what people say, you repeat it back to them in your own words. That is a good thing to do. Doing it like a robot is a bad thing, and it's super annoying, and it makes me want to throw this thing at you. So be caring in the way that you do it, actually use your real words, actually try to understand what people are saying, but make sure that you're getting people exactly what they want and what they need and thinking outside the box as people are talking to you. Get it for them, and then go the extra mile. Normally I would ask you guys to brainstorm a bunch of ways. I don't have time in this presentation, so I'm just gonna say, sending people thank you cards, offering to have a product delivered to somebody's house if you're out of it in the moment, introducing people to another local resource, another organization that you are or should be working with that might be really relevant to them and their needs. Just think about all the different ways that you can go the extra mile to make that experience special. I don't mean like just helping them out the door with their pet, like we should be doing that anyway. It's really looking for something that's above and beyond so that they will remember you and remember that experience and want to come back. We have to have new messages, and I really harped on you guys a lot about this in my first speech. So I think that all I really want to say about this is we have to abandon the idea that we know what people need to hear before we've even met them. We don't. The most effective way to be an awesome messenger for your idea is to learn how to really, really listen to the person in front of you and really address the things that they are prioritizing in the conversation. If you do this well, you will have multiple opportunities to message them about everything under the sun as far as veterinary care. But if you just go straight at them with your message and without really listening to their story, without listening to their concern that might seem frivolous, you're going to lose them. And honestly, people give you all the tools that you need to be a really effective messenger if you just can learn to hear them, if you can just listen to where they're coming from. So what makes an experience transformative, or a message transformative? It includes new information. So, tell people stuff that they need to know. It meets people where they are. So I showed that picture of Tasha yesterday, the pit bull that was on the lightweight tethering device. She eventually got off of that lightweight tethering device and got into a fenced enclosure, and she comes inside every night now. But when we first met David and Tasha, having a message about bringing your dog inside the house every day was not something that he was ready for. And knowing that is why we were successful. We didn't want Tasha to be on a big, heavy chain. We didn't want her to be tethered at all. But we knew that stepping stone to the next best thing was really important. So having that lightweight tethering material that we built and gave to David meant the world to him, because he had never really thought about that weight being on the dog's neck. And we put it on her, and she was running around and acting like a puppy all of a sudden. And he was like, he saw it in that moment. And then that opened the door to starting to have more conversations about what would it take to maybe get this fenced in back here? Can we talk to your landlord? All of that stuff. So making sure that you're not setting goals that aren't reachable in these customer service interactions. Because again, if you do this well, you're going to have the chance to keep talking to people. It has to be emotionally engaging. So telling people real stories about your life and listening to people's real stories about their lives. Data is not motivating. Data is not going to change the world. It's good to have it. You need to know it. Absolutely have it. But nobody's going to have their heart physically shifted by shelter stats. That stuff might be a part of your story, but you have to have a story that goes with it. And it's got to be shared when it's a receptive moment. So remember my story about the hospital and the shoulder pit, and how I was trying to make that guy spay neuter his dog when his dog was standing there with a broken scapula. Not a receptive moment. Not a good call on my part. You're not going to try and shift somebody's entire belief system when they're in crisis, when they're upset, when they're in a hurry. So find time when you can have those conversations if now isn't the right moment. And most importantly, it's about it being the right messenger. So make sure the right person is having these conversations. How much time do I have left? Okay, good. We're going to do a partner activity. Yay! Everybody gets to talk and move. All right. I want you guys to partner up. We're going to do a pretty fast version of this. I want you to just find somebody that's sitting near you, and I want each of you to tell each other an abbreviated short version of a story about the first time you helped an animal. If you can't think of the very first time, it's fine. I want you to tell each other a story about helping an animal. I want you to give each other about a minute to a minute and a half each. We're only going to have about 3 minutes, so don't go too long and not let your friend tell their story. So you should have switched by now. The second person should be telling their story. 30 seconds. Okay, everybody. Thank you. I know that that's kind of a tough task to tell a story in a minute that I just asked you to think of 1 second before. But here's why I wanted you guys to do that activity. So have you guys ever heard of neural mirroring? Yeah? I heard a couple of yeses. So mirror neurons, or neural mirroring, it's our brain's empathy center. It's how empathy works, and it's kind of crazy and cool. It's a little bit of a life hack that you can use. So when you tell someone a story that is a real story that you have real feelings about and that happened to you, and that person listens to that story, all the parts of your brain that are feeling the feelings that go along with that story and are lighting up, those same parts are lighting up in the brain of the other person. And you're actually switching on their emotions and engaging them around the same feelings that you have. So how powerful is that? If we can use stories to actually make the person in front of us feel what we're feeling, we can potentially create a lot of receptivity. As messengers for social change, we need to be able to listen to people's stories because it will help us feel what they feel. And we need to have in our back pockets at least 6 or 7 stories for the most common situations that come up that are real stories that we actually like to tell, and that we can use to really have a message and a moment with somebody. You guys already know what I'm going to say. These have to be optimistic stories without a bad guy. You got to come up with them. You got to dig deep. You have all the time in the world to think of these stories, but start thinking about them and practice telling them, and choose ones that you like to tell, because that will come across. You guys can tell I like talking about this, right? If I was doing a presentation about something I hated, you would also be able to tell. It's important that you tell stories that you want to tell, and it really will help you build a bridge with the listener. If you can turn on the same part of your brain and their brain at the same time, the next step is sharing that message, and the door is going to be much wider than it would have been otherwise. New messengers. So I touched on this the other day as well. I think it's important that the target audience trusts you. And when I first started doing outreach especially, but also working in customer service in the hospital, I think there was this idea that, like, for me, as a young white male, I might have a hard time connecting with a large portion of the people that were coming into our hospital, or whose doors I was knocking on. And people would kind of say, like, well, what are you going to wear? Is that what you're going to wear? You should wear a backward baseball cap, blah, 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 when you're, like, going into the projects to do outreach. And I never did that. I mean, sometimes I wear a backwards baseball cap, but not in order to fit in. What it's really about is actually just being authentic. Can you be your authentic self? Can you be the same you that you would be when you were talking to your mom or your sister or your friend when you're talking to a client? If you can do that, you're not going to be faced with any kind of barriers around them believing you. People trust you when they feel like you're being authentic, and they can tell. They can tell by the expression on your face. They can tell by the tone that you use and the words that you use. And that's why I think it's so important that we think about the words that we use, and that we get really comfortable talking in front of clients the same way that we talk about them when they're not there. If you can do that, then you're never going to have to worry about saying the wrong thing. If you hate people, maybe customer service is not the best role for you. It's okay. There's plenty of work that needs to be done that doesn't involve talking to people. But honestly, if you're a veterinarian, if you're a vet tech, if you're a customer service person, if you're working on the phones, we got to move past grumpy face. It's just not, it's not helping. It's not helping you, and it's not helping the movement. So who's right for the job? When we're looking at people that are going to work in customer service at my organization, we're looking for people who are genuinely interested and curious about people. Curiosity is the key to this. Inquiry over advocacy. People who want to know more things about you than they want to tell you things about themselves. people who love people and are energized by people. Our entire hiring process, which has its own hour-long presentation, is designed around hiring for culture and hiring people that are going to be very successful in an organization that puts customer service at the very, very top. In a nutshell, watch for people-oriented behaviors in your hiring practices. We do info sessions where we have groups of 20 to 30 people come in at once. We do a presentation, and we have our culture ambassadors, the people that I think I want to replicate, the technicians that I wish that I could breed. Those people are on my hiring team. I know, it's super creepy sounding. Those people are on my hiring team. Those people are on my hiring team because A, it's a great reward for them to say, I like you so much, I want you to find more of you. And B, they're not gonna pick people from this process that seem like they're not gonna fit into the clinic. It's not the only part of the hiring process, but it's an important part of it. Look for people that are helping each other. Look for people that offer to, help set up or break down if you're doing something where you have them come to that. If you can do interviews in coffee shops or restaurants, watch how they treat people that are the service people. And then ask questions in your interview process that are geared towards finding people that really, really want to help everyone. So tell me about a time you broke the rules for a customer is a great one. Because ultimately, it's about getting everybody in the right seat on the bus. And I think that is I think that's in Good to Great. It's in a lot of books, whatever. It's super important. There might be people in your organization who belong in your organization, but who are not in the right place. And if you feel like your culture is toxic, if you feel like you have an uphill battle with rolling out these ideas and these philosophies, it might not be that you need to fire everybody. I mean, it might be, but it probably isn't. You probably have some people that are really well-intentioned and that are either just burnt out or tired or are just not in the job that they should be in. There's a guy who works for us. He's worked for us for almost 20 years now. He's been here almost since the beginning. And he early on was in a role where he was dealing directly with customers over the front desk, and he would be really, really friendly in the morning and really, really bitchy in the afternoon. And it was just like every day. And finally, we started talking about like, okay, well, what is it about this thing? And we started moving him around, and we ended up putting him on the phones team. And he's been on the phones team for 15 years now, and he is like the most amazing. People write Facebook reviews about him just answering questions on the phone because he's so great. But like, it was just a little bit of a shift, right? I mean, he still wanted to be in customer service, but he needed to not be like up in front of people all day. He needed to have the ability to like clock out and go walk around and get a drink and whatever. And then we have other people that can't stand sitting in front of a computer and answering phones all day, and they really want to be in the clinics and doing that. So just getting people in the right seats is super important if you want to shift the behavior in your organization, because if you cannot shift the culture in your organization, you will not be able to execute on your mission in the way that you want to. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. I love this saying because it's really true. You can have the best laid plans in the world. You can go back, you can come to my social change workshop, and we will lay out a 5-year plan for how you are going to design a program specifically for the community that you want to serve and all of the things that are going to change. But if you don't address the culture inside your organization, if you don't talk about believing that people love their pets and believing that people can change and believing that we can build programs to help that happen, you're not going to be successful. So a few more things to help make that happen. She was mentioning earlier the 10-4 rule. It's actually 10 feet, 4 feet, because I'm from America. Meters would be a little bit more challenging. So this is a rule at Emancipet, and this applies to every single individual from the CEO down. So this is not just customer service people. If you are within 10 feet of another human being, what is that, 3 meters? You must smile at them and make eye contact. If you are within 4 feet of somebody, you must smile at them, make eye contact, and greet them verbally in some way. And this does not just apply to the one time you see them. This means every time you pass your coworker, you say, hey, how's it going? And every time you walk from building A to building B, you say, hey, oh my God, that's the cutest actual puppy I've ever seen, and I'm going to steal it from you. Whatever you want to say to people, but you say something, you acknowledge something. Have you guys ever had the experience of, I know I've had this experience in shelters, but even like human hospitals or restaurants where the staff are busy and they like are actually terrified that you're going to make them do something or talk to them. So they walk through the space with their head down like that. I know my veterinarians do that because they're like, I don't, if a client catches me, I'm never going to get into the clinic. And it makes for a very unwelcoming environment, and it can be transformative in all the wrong ways. And I know that in the States, we're very guilty of having this feel of like, nobody wants to go to a shelter because everybody's pissed off at you before you've even gotten there. So just really thinking about that, this is a great way to address that. 10-4 is also trucker lingo in the United States. So it's like a common thing to say 10-4, good buddy. So I call this the good buddy rule. And the COO of the BCSPCA said that when we rolled this out for his staff, he told his staff if they didn't follow the 10-4 rule that he was going to institute the 2x4 rule. Responding to customer complaints. So this is another great policy that we have. Acknowledging the emotion, so acknowledging that somebody is upset. Before you even try to get into solving mode, I can see that you're upset. I am so sorry that that is happening. A lot of times I run into people that are scared to apologize because they think that it's an admission of guilt. I don't really care whether it's an admission of guilt or not. Telling somebody that you're sorry that they're having a bad experience in your place of business is the right thing to do. And it's kind of necessary to do that before you're going to pave the way to being able to solve the problem for them. What you find is often, if you do step 1 and step 2, acknowledge the problem or acknowledge the emotion and apologize, you've actually done step 3. There's a lot of customer service issues that don't require an actual action. It's simply just saying like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. I see you're upset. You're totally right. How can I fix this for you? And then at the end of that experience, saying thank you. Thanking people for the opportunity to address that before it goes to Facebook or Yelp or to the phone lines or whatever happens. What are the tools and who gets to use them? So do your staff have the ability to help clients without having to escalate it to a manager? Can they give discounts? Can they give product? Can they move somebody up in line? Can they send an email or a note of apology directly to a client? In what ways are you empowering your staff to be super awesome and go above and beyond and go the extra mile? There's nothing more frustrating than dealing with somebody and knowing that at the end of this conversation, you're gonna have to have the same conversation with their manager. So build systems for your staff and let them know, like you can give people 10% off of anything at any time at your discretion. We have this program available for certain people. You are welcome to put people into that program if needed, whatever it is. Just make sure you have the tools, think about the tools, talk about the tools with the teams that are going to use them, let them brainstorm some of the ideas that come up the most, and then enable them to do it. And elevate the role of customer service and outreach in your organization. I feel like for the longest time when I would go to shelters and desexing clinics, the customer service was just treated as this sort of extra thing that you had to have to deal with the people. It's not. It's actually the most important thing that we do. It's really important that we practice great medicine. It's really important that our shelters are clean and sanitary, absolutely. But if we don't put customer service up high on a pedestal, if we don't make it as important as the job of a veterinarian, then we're shortchanging the experience of our clients, and we're honestly not going to be able to keep people that are great at customer service in our organizations because they're not going to feel like they're appreciated. Everybody's been asking me, how do I change the way that I tell stories? How do I change the way that my coworkers tell stories? Well, here's my challenge for you. Everybody here is familiar with the juice cleanse? They're awful and you can't drink coffee when you're doing them. I hate them. Story cleanse. Over the next 30 days, I challenge you guys to go through your websites, go through your social media, go through your mind, and get rid of all the judgment. Get rid of the word responsible pet owner. Get rid of other words that strike you as possibly being condescending or derogatory. Think of how any of those things would feel if they were about you, and if it's not good, get rid of it. Come up with some new stories. Retire the story about the evil pet owner and come up with one about the successful pet owner. I promise you that not only will this make you more successful as a social change maker, but it will make you happier and it will make your work more sustainable. And I'm going to close with one story that I think is really fascinating. So are you guys familiar with the Good Samaritan study that was done at Princeton Seminary years ago. So it was a group of seminary students, and they were all told to read the story of the Good Samaritan. Y'all have the Bible here, yeah? They were all told to read the story of the Good Samaritan, which is, it's a story about a guy on the road and another guy comes and helps him. I don't have the Bible where I'm coming. So they were all told to read the story, and then they were told that they had to go to the other side of campus and do a 5-minute presentation on the Good Samaritan. Now, they were being messed with, and they were told, each one of them was told a different thing. So 1/3 of the group was told that there was no rush, that they had 30 minutes to get there, and it was 10 minutes away. The next group was told they had just enough time to get there. Their presentation was in 10 minutes, and it was about 10 minutes away. And the third group was told, your presentation is in 2 minutes, and it's 10 minutes away. Now, they gave them a map that showed them how to get from the room that they were in to the room where they were going to be giving their speech, and they evilly positioned a man laying on the sidewalk, coughing and moaning, in the path that all of these people were going to have to take. So this is fascinating. What do you guys think happened? So, of the people who were in a rush, the people that were in no rush at all, I can't barely read that, 67% stopped to help them. The people who were in some rush that had just enough time, only 45% stopped to help. And the group that were told that they were running late, almost no one stopped to help, which is shocking, right? And kind of a black mark on like all of those seminary students' records forever. And I'm kind of shocked that of the ones that had plenty of time, that only like 70% stopped. But I love this story because what it really illustrates is that if we don't carve out time for having conversations with people and not just responding to immediate needs in the moment, if we don't carve out time for having very intentional conversations with the people that we serve, then we're never going to change. We're never going to meet these new challenges. We're going to keep carrying forward this old mantra that is not true and that ultimately is damaging the work that we're doing and not getting animals into homes. So that was my last talk. If you guys want to come to my workshop tomorrow, that'd be awesome. I just want to say, you guys are so nice. I've had so much fun. You're the nicest group of people I've ever met at a conference. And I will have business cards afterwards for people that are waiting on business cards from me. Thank you.